This is Dark Sunshine, written by Joanne and read for you by Revoicer.
Prologue. As Celia bent down to pick the cotton buds from the blossoming florets, she felt a surge of heat upon her. It was his crusty, sweaty hand pressed against her back. It slowly slithered its way down her spine. An ugly feeling swelled within. She cringed as she heard his raspy voice in her ear. Fetch me a cup of cold lemonade. She twitched in anger, sadness, then humility. She knew she had to succumb to his demands, for she learned from listening to her elders, don't give no massa no lip, just do it. It'll all pay off in the end. She immediately wobbled past the gossipers and up the steps to the porch where Mrs. Phyllis Sunshine Henson Knowles, wife of Captain, sat. Sunshine was what everyone called her, and she used every bit of ridicule to make life more miserable for everyone. She sat with a protruded mouth and a satirical expression on her face. Her burgundy shawl revealed her peachy vanilla skin all the more as she crossed her legs, showing off her dangling open toe shoes. Her sunglasses hung from the tips of her fingers as she posed in her proud stature for just a moment. She then glared at Celia as she slowly walked towards her, and without any prompting, Sunshine laughed so hard that all the field workers stopped to see what was so funny. Celia was inevitably the center of attention, obviously the butt of Sunshine's joke. She continued to wobble along. Most folks suspected it was Captain's baby. Some thought a mysterious man fathered the child. Celia didn't care, though, as long as the baby had 10 fingers and 10 toes and a good head on his shoulders. That was good enough for her. Even during the intimidating moments of Captain's demands, the brutal heat and the burden of work, she held on to a special belief that one day she and her baby would live a life of greatness. While Sunshine still carried on in her act of hysterical laughter, Celia humbly walked towards the cooler to get Captain's lemonade. But Missy Sunshine had other plans. She deceitfully slipped her foot out in an effort to trip Celia. Her 4-year-old son, Stephen Knowles, happened to see it all. Knowing possible danger, he shouted out, startling his mother and Celia. Mommy, Mommy, watch your foot. Miss Eli trip and break her water belly. Celia smiled at Stephen as his mother's mission dissolved into her psyche. Stephen saved Celia from possible injury. Stephen then gingerly walked up to Celia. Hi, Celia. Hi, my little munchkin. Celia responded. Celia was a favorite amongst the Knowles children. She served as their in-house servant for over 7 years until she was dismissed by Miss Sunshine. Miss Sunshine, as Celia affectionately called her, was a loving lady to look at, but spoiled and stubborn to contend with. It was in the heat of the day, high noon, and all was quiet again, after the explosive outburst of laughter from Mrs. Sunshine. The only sound was the whacking and plucking of plants. It was the only sound the workers could make during working hours. Captain would always scan the area around him with suspicious eyes. He had the notion that the field workers despised him and secretly plotted to take over his empire. So, because of this paranoia, he ordered everyone to work in complete silence. Celia always thought he was a little crazy in the head. 7 years ago, when Celia became head household cook, she formed a special bond with Sunshine Henson. She was a trustworthy person who was very gracious. Because of this, Sunshine Henson gave Celia preferential treatment. She secretly taught Celia basic skills in math, English, social studies, and a little bit of geometry. She even taught her how to swim. Captain did not like this and strongly believed that slaves should not learn anything. The only thing he wanted Celia to do was clean and cook and groom his ego once in a while. But that didn't affect Celia. She continued to grow in honesty, integrity, and in knowledge. The remainder of the audio for DS First audio piece. Captain Knowles was a crafty, deceitful leader who was always on the verge of angry outbursts. He was known for ridiculing others and dumping his negativity on others every day. He was, in a word, evil. He developed the ominous notion that he had to brand everyone on his plantation, either by threatening and engaging with whipping the men and by threatening or impregnating the women. As each day passed, Captain would always show his bravado by scornful demands and verbal threats. However, it wasn't the ridicule and assaults that Celia had to be cautious of. It was the snarls of lust and hints of sexual innuendos that Celia had to contend with. When Mrs. Shine went on her errands, Captain Knowles would vehemently pursue Celia while she was trying to do her work either by a touch, a harassing demand, a comment, or a threat. However, he was never able to get very far, for she would put on an outrageous act of uncontrollable sneezing and coughing. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years of this pressure. However, in the seventh year of her service, something started to happen. Perhaps a reawakening from her, a changed ego from Cap, or an unidentifiable entity that masked their whole journey. It was something stronger than fear that led her to do something beyond reason, something so startling and unique that it kindled the blood in more ways than one. Chapter 1. Bittersweet love out of the corner of her eye. Celia saw the sun rise early, earlier than usual, she thought. She turned for a fuller glimpse of the greenery that lay ahead of her. With no human inhabitants, the plantation looked peaceful through the kitchen window. It looked rested, calm, even colorful with its vibrant greenery and sporadic hints of yellow and white daffodils. Perhaps this would be a better day after all. Hopefully better than the past three, she thought. So far things seemed to be serene and quiet. Everyone was out of the house. Captain was off somewhere tending to his duties. His wife, Sunshine Henson. Knowles made a friendly visit to Sally May's house, and their two children, Stephen and Anderson, were away at school. The house was eerily quiet, but Celia hadn't noticed. She was busy trying to prepare for a late dinner party that Sunshine was going to hold for the other colony holder. There were 10 pounds of chicken breast to bake, 7 bushels of fresh green beans to marinate and simmer in the cooker, fresh cabbage to chop, season, and simmer, 10 pounds of potatoes to peel, butter, and bake, and fresh ginger to pull from the garden, sweeten with pure cane sugar and store in the cooler. It was a few hours before high noon, and if the oven worked right this time and the water system ran fluently, Celia would have everything ready in time for 4:30 p.m. when Sunshine was due back. Just as Celia turned around to put the chicken breasts in the oven, she turned right into Cap Knowles, thus dropping the pan and all of the chicken on the floor. In a devastating fit, she shied away. Not again, she thought. To avoid Cap Knowles' advances, she immediately dropped to the floor and picked up the chicken. No need for that, Celia A.U. I think you know why I'm here, S.A., don't you? She continued to pick up the pieces. Celia refused to call him captain when he was in this kind of mood. Angrily, she said, I can't be bothered with this today. The chores are too much, and I have to do this. Miss Sunshine will be home soon. Now please leave me and get out. No, you don't have to get to the cooking. Right now, you will listen to me. You know, I can have anyone or anything I want, right? He impatiently asked her. There was no response. He continued, I've been very patient with you, Celia. He pulled on her arm to stand up. He reiterated, very patient. And you've consistently and selfishly ignored me. He moved closer to her face and lifted up her chin. Celia started to go into her sickness spells again, but he put his hand over her mouth. Don't try to put that act on again. I knew it was an act the minute you started. It's not going to work this time. He continued to untie his belt and unzip his pants. He pulled off his shirt and ripped off hers, threw her on the floor, and started stripping off her clothes. She knew that he was serious this time. The feeling of helplessness came over her again. Miss Sunshine will be home soon. You don't want to. Shut up. He snapped at her. She almost gave up until she saw a hairbrush nearby and a surge of power overwhelmed her. She found the will and motive to fight back. Pinned down, she was able to reach it, and she started to beat on his back, his head and legs until he turned black and blue. He tumbled over her and yelped in pain and agony. She immediately turned around, but he grabbed a hold of her ankle and dragged her down. He regained his strength and hopped back on top of her, holding her arms down behind her head. I don't know what game you're playing, but it's gonna stop. And guess what? Oh, he got even closer to her face. I'm gonna win. He gripped her arms even tighter until she lightly screamed in pain. I will win this little silly game you're playing. Be ready the next time, or else I'll be rougher. He released her arms and charged off. A determined yet scarred Celia dismissed the abuse, like the other 40 or so that occurred over the past several years, with all the struggles she endured. This one, like the many others, made her all the more desirous to run away from all the madness. Her thoughts would escape to the times when she first met Joan de Paul Williams. It was like an attraction that ignited into a passionate flame. His thick mahogany hands would gently caress her soft ebony skin as he delicately and succulently pulsated the very vibe of her emotions. His warm lips would lightly fondle her plump violet orifice as he would finger through her thick locks and delight in the elation it brought. Their attraction led to many days thereafter secretly meeting at the well. However, it was that one kiss on that one starry night that fused their souls together, creating a euphoria of desire beyond measure. Captain happened to see Celia and John one day, and only 3 words slipped from his mouth. He must go. Celia overheard him say this as he was kidding around with his older son Anderson. He continued to say, the both of them are much too involved. I ain't having no hanky panky going on around here. It was no more than 4 days later that John was carted off of the Nose Colony plantation. Captain Knowles simply laughed at the tears Celia shed. Little did he know the serious effects it caused. Sadness was her waking state. She was burdened with an emptiness that left her in a constant state of remorse and anger towards Cap. Celia knew that time was of the essence and that she was running out of it. She had to think fast of what to do before Captain would decide one day to sprawl his large torso all over her petted body. Just then, Sunshine fancied her way into the room, breaking Celia's concentration. You know, see me, Mabe, as she affectionately called her. I will be having another dinner party in a couple of weeks. My friend Stella will be here from Johnston Colony, so I will need only the finest of the fine prepared. Understand? Piously, Celia nodded and continued on with her work. She then realized that that was the answer to her dilemma. She would sneak a message through Sunshine's invitation for John to meet her on the second Saturday of the next month in the barn by late evening. Celia knew that she was playing with fire. She knew that this whole plan may be a wild goose chase, leading nowhere. She even knew that he may not even be there, and Stella may throw the invitation away. Her venture was very risky and ridiculous and could cost her her life. But her desire beckoned her to go forward with the plan, despite the fact that she never saw a map before and she never planned anything in her life. She assessed and calculated a meticulous arrangement to escape from her world of madness. Her preparation called for close observations, tenacity, and patience. In only 4 weeks, she had to finish off a 9-course meal for 75 guests and store it in the basement cooler where all of the food was stored for future events. Organize her route, pack the necessary items for what she hoped to be only a 6-hour trip, and work out a scheme to get from point A, the Knowles house, to point B, Johnston Colony. In previous months, Sunshine held lavish parties inviting many guests from all over. From as far south as Suffolk County near Horsham Patch to North Riverside County at Johnston Colony, and as far east from the back roads of Bayonne County to the western tip of Evonia's Way. But today's chores were the focus, and Celia had to face a dreaded place that no one dared venture into. She was very careful as she walked down the steps to the basement. The shifty winds hit her face, reminding her of the crevices in the wall that allowed the cool winds to swirl in and out of the dreary looking sublevel. No one dared go down into the basement due to its dark, dusty, eerie atmosphere. A coal miner's doom, a wretched room full of filth, were just some of the descriptions it was given by previous attendants.